This is an 8-iron, and it's a dead shank.
Wow.
Way right.
Oh, takes a hop
shank.
off the path.
You gotta be kidding me. Very tough pitch shot right here. You gotta hit it into the hill, one hop up and bite, and it's in.
Kind of like that.
Well, I would like to welcome to the Sub 70 podcast the great Peter Kessler. Peter, thanks for taking the time today. Lot to talk about of what happened yesterday with Tiger winning the Masters.
Well, it's fantastic to be with you. I mean, this is, going to be one of the great weeks ever in the sense that we're going to start thinking about what Tiger's win meant. We're going to try to put it into perspective. We're going to think about the Masters and other major championships that warmed our hearts and stirred our emotions and kindled our memories. So this is a fantastic time to join you, and I'm very appreciative that you would call on me.
Well, let's talk about, you've seen a lot of golf in your day. You've been around the sport for a long time. Where do you sort of rank it? Where do you put it? What's your sort of, takeaway from the events that unfolded yesterday?
Well, you have to rank it up there with the most meaningful things that one has ever seen in sport or learned about, considering things that happened, before we were born, like, Ben Hogan's accident in 49. But remember, in that case, the accident was in February of 49. He lost in a playoff for the LA Open the following January. And yes, things were crushed. And yes, he apparently was near death. And yes, he had pain for the rest of his life. But he won a major in 48. And he had the accident in 49. He picked right up where he left off in 1950 and won 6 major championships through 1953. So whatever the damage was to his body certainly didn't seem to damage his game. And quite frankly, a lot of guys who knew Ben Hogan really well at that time, like Tommy Bolt, felt that Hogan's leg action quieted down after the accident because it had to, because it wasn't functioning as it did before. But Ben had been such an aggressive lower body player from the top of his swing that now he was able to sync things up a little bit better and not sometimes spin out of his way too soon with his lower body. You think of Jack in 1986 at the Masters. Here he is, 46 years old. Nobody expected anything from him that week. He hadn't been making noise recently, but you've got to put that in perspective because between the ages of 38 and 46, Jack won 9 times on the PGA Tour, including 4 major championships, including the 4 in a row in the order in which they were conceived. He won the British Open, or the Open, which started in 1860. He won that in 78. Then he wins the U.S. Open in 1980, which started in 1895. Then he wins the PGA Championship in 1980, which started in 1916. Then he wins the Masters Championship in 1986 to complete for the 3rd time the modern Grand Slam in all 4 events in the order in which they were conceived. So Jack was not irrelevant in 86. He just hadn't done very much recently, but he had won the Memorial. He had won 9 times. He was getting ready to win the career slam for the 3rd time. So while it was one of the greatest days in the history of golf in every sense of the word, in terms of thinking about your family and your dad and your love for your kids and how you got started with golf and what is it about the golf course that attracted it to you to begin with. So that was completely different than the Hogan experience. So now you have this particular one, and folks are going to think of other tournaments that meant a lot to them. But in this particular case, here's a fellow who won 3 juniors, then 3 U.S. amateurs, and he wins 14 major championships, professional ones, in a fairly brief period of time from 97 to 2008. And now here we are in 2019, and it's more than 10 years since he won his last major. And over that 10-year period, there's a whole lot of guys who only won 1 major, whether it be Adam Scott or Duffner or Keegan Bradley. It doesn't matter. Zillion guys have won one in the last 10 years, including Darren Clark and Y.E. Yang. Guess what? Tiger's also won one in the last 10 years. So he just tied 10 or 12 guys who picked up one since he stopped winning in '08. And the only guy who had more major championships before him when he won his last, before yesterday, major championship in '08, the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines in San Diego, only Nicklaus was ahead of him in majors, and only Snead was ahead of him in wins. Now, as you and I talk today, my friend, Jack Nicklaus has 20 major championships. That's 18 professional majors and 2 amateurs. Jack just decided not to count the amateurs a few years ago because Tiger has 3, so Jack figured, well, maybe I shouldn't count them now since Tiger's piling up the pro majors. But in everything Jack ever wrote or said and talked to me about on television, it was always 20. And Tiger always counted his 3 amateurs and Jack's 2. So now it's 20 to 18. And now the next 2 major championships are taking place where Tiger's particularly comfortable. That doesn't guarantee anything, excuse me. It just means that it's a place you're comfortable and you've won before. It doesn't mean you're going to win again. So this Tiger story is very complicated. It has so many layers. You've got a story of redemption. You've got a story of second acts in America, meaning you get to come back and do what you did once before well. The great, the writer F. Scott Fitzgerald said in the 1930s, he said, there are no second acts in American life. Well, we just saw one with Tiger Woods, certainly. And people who come back from failures and people who are trying to move forward, a lot of them get second acts too. So while it was an interesting turn of phrase, I do believe in second acts in America. I do believe in second acts generally. I believe in second acts for Tiger Woods. I believe in second acts on the golf course. And I think what Tiger did yesterday, starting with his second shot on 11 from the cart path, which is what I think particularly unnerved Francesco, because at that point, Francesco had already snapped an iron into 10 and didn't turn through the shot. So I looked for it again on 11. He didn't turn through the shot. He definitely hit a hooking iron, and if the ground had been firm, which it was not, that ball's easily in the water. But the important thing is he knew that. He knew even though the ground was soft, he got away with one, and he ended up on the green. And then here's Tiger in absolute garbage, 50 yards right of the fairway on a cart path of crushed rock, and he hits an absolute bullet inside of Francesco. And that's when Francesco knew for sure that he personally was in trouble and that Tiger personally was not.
With all of the personal stuff that he had to deal with in the last 10 years and the physical stuff, did you ever think he would be back even competing at this level, let alone winning? I mean, as you saw the journey, did you always have belief that he was so special that you would see this, or did you think it was too far gone?
Yeah, I think what happened is I personally got to a point where rooting for Tiger became more a anticipation of things that you hoped would happen as opposed to a realistic sense based on his recent experiences. So based on recent experiences, which piled up over now an 11-year period, we know that rooting for him over these last several years, particularly in between back surgeries and some of the other issues that he had to deal with personally, that there was no reason to think he was going to win another major. I mean, he wasn't Tiger Woods, that player anymore. And I knew Tiger pretty well from 1996, the end of 96, when he was 20, and he and I did our first TV show together, right through the slam that concluded in 01 at the Masters. And I knew him reasonably well then. I wouldn't say we were good friends. That's stretching it, but we were certainly very friendly, and he would take my calls and he would come to the studio whenever I wanted. We had that kind of a thing going for sure, and he trusted me and I loved having him on. But I didn't get close enough to him and his group over these last few years to have a really good sense of what was or was not going on. And his people are, masters of spin, and Tiger's a master of deflection, and you're not really sure what he really meant. And But what I saw in the last year made me think that, yeah, he could do it again because, he briefly held the lead at the Open Championship at Carnoustie playing with Molinari, who ended up winning. And Tiger wasn't just quite ready yet. He had the lead on the back nine and couldn't quite keep it together. Then he goes to the PGA Championship a few weeks later, shoots a final round 64 and finishes second in the golf tournament. That impressed me. Then he goes to Eastlake, which is a really hard golf course, and it's a wonderful golf course, even though Reese Jones did a little bit of a muck up there, which is what Reese does. And then when he won at Eastlake, the Tour Championship, playing with Rory, that's when I went, you know what? I think he's playing some good golf. He looks like he feels pretty good. I don't see that stress in his face. I don't see those deep furrows in his brow. I remember when Greg Norman had a chance to win the Open Championship that Sink won, that when Greg got to the first tee the last day, I saw this look on his face where his skin appeared to be stretched so tight across his face that if he smiled or he frowned, the skin might actually crack. And he was a whiter shade of pale, as Procol Harum said. He really was. And I expected trouble, and he got into trouble with his very first shot. He tried to play some kind of a safety shot instead of playing his game, and I knew right then, that the whole thing was over. And so, I really believed that coming into this event, that Tiger was the best player who was going to play at the Masters, and that he had the toughest mental game. Now, my son Christopher, who is in a pool, and I never guess. I'm always saying, nobody knows anything. Just let him play. Pretend it's a movie. If it was a second scene, you wouldn't ask how it ended. You just let it unfold. Let the golf tournament unfold. Yesterday after 6 holes, guys are saying that's it. Molinari hit the most incredible chip. It's on the 6th hole. You have to finish. It's like the second inning of a baseball game. It's like, okay, can we get underway here for a second? But, my read was that Tiger coming in was the best player in the best form. And I said to my son Christopher, I would take Tiger this week. And, of course, he took him. And he had one other pick, and he picked Rory, which I wasn't so sure about one way or the other. There's an enigma for you in a 1-hour conversation. But I believe that Tiger was the best player going into this event based on what's happened since last summer at Carnoustie.
You were down at Augusta. I know you're spending some time with Mr. Gary Player. And did he give any sort of insight that you could share of, what he was witnessing as it was unfolding, or, thoughts that he saw afterwards of, once again, he's reached the highest pinnacles of playing professional golf, and, who better to have some insight of what it takes to win a major in your 40s than Gary Player?
Well, that's right. I mean, particularly considering, he had won the Masters the year, before at the age of 42 in 1978. So he was intimately familiar. But Gary Player never had any of those kinds of issues or accidents or things to deal with in an interpersonal kind of way. So, well, he couldn't relate to what Tiger had to go through personally because, well, nobody really could. That was Tiger's life, not Gary's. But, Gary has always said to me that he thought, and Arnold said the same thing to me, and Jack said the same thing to me, that Tiger had the freest release through the strike of anybody that he'd ever seen play golf. And he thought he had the best distance control with his irons of anybody he'd ever seen play golf. Now, he saw Snead and Hogan and Nelson and Jack and Arnie and Billy. I mean, everybody, and Seve, and they all agreed that, that Tiger was the guy. And during the first several holes yesterday, when people were saying, in particular, Tom Brady wrote a tweet and said, man, nobody's going to beat Molinari. He just doesn't make mistakes. And they were only on the 6th hole at that time. And so Gary tweeted back and said, don't worry, everybody makes mistakes. Hang on, they're only on the 6th hole, or something to that effect. But starting with the second shot on 11 inside of Molinari's to that green, Tiger never missed another shot. I mean, it was ironclad from the second shot on 11 through the final hole of 18. Everything went exactly where it was supposed to go. There were no blocks. There were no snaps. His distance control with his irons was, as usual, better than anybody ever been able to control their iron distances. And so, it was, an incredibly long, tough, and ultimately very triumphant journey.
In your years of dealing with Tiger, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, that you knew him as a young professional, did you see that in him when he was, you kind of, like I said, talked about this a little bit earlier, that he was quite easy to deal with and, affable? I remember those interviews he used to have, and he had a big smile on his face. And then some point in the mid-2000s or something, it looked like it got pretty tough with him in the media. Now he's kind of come full circle again, where he smiles and he answers the questions. What progression of your relationship with him did you sort of see that transition from, young guy to, full on professional? And then I assume that fence goes up deeper and deeper. And then are you seeing the same thing that we all kind of are, since you kind of know him better, that it really does look like he's playing with joy now and doesn't mind the process and seems more open to let the public in a little bit?
Yeah, certainly what happened was, you'll recall clearly that, after Tiger first started doing shows with me, he did a couple of print interviews, and he told a dirty joke in the car to one of the interviewers and said, please don't use that. And the guy said, oh, I'm definitely using it. And so Tiger got burned. Okay, Tiger trusted somebody and he got burned. And so he found out fairly quickly that his only safe haven was to do something with me. And so he came in quite regularly until I got fired at the end of '01, and we were very friendly. And and I'd seen him from time to time since, and of course saw him in all kinds of major championships. Subsequently, getting fired didn't end my interest in golf or my ability to go to the events, and nor would I have let that have interrupted me. But I think when he got burned, he got guarded. I think he felt some racism. The thing about Jack in '86 was everybody liked that. And when anybody who wasn't happy about what happened with Jack, even people who cared for Seve, who ended up making the bogey on 15 to Jack's eagle, even people who loved Seve were good with Jack winning. But it's different with Tiger. Not everybody likes Tiger. First of all, he doesn't look like everybody else, and he hasn't had the same life that Jack had, and he isn't considered the same kind of balanced family man, even though he's great with his kids and has a good relationship with his ex-wife, Elin, as I understand it. And so, Tiger isn't universally loved, as Jack by '86 certainly was. Jack's love affair, or our love affair with Jack, really started in '70 after he lost 20 pounds in 20 days at the end of '69 after the Ryder Cup. And he called his clothier and said, in 20 days, I'm going to be 20 pounds lighter, so come outfit me again. And 20 days later, he lost 20 pounds. So no teams and green juices and, a year of all kinds of, let's do that. He did it like grown men did it at that time, like I do it right now. You do exercise a little more and you eat a little less. This is not complicated. And that's, it's funny, it just made me think for some reason of Jordan Spieth, who I think totally overcomplicates golf now. He's in a place where there's too much thinking, there's too much stress, there's too much bad memory, there's scar tissue that he's yielding to and then not letting it get out of the way. But Jack's was universally loved. Tiger's was less so. And yes, Tiger has become more affable. Yes, he's putting on a better face for the audience. No, I do not like the interviews he's doing with that young English woman who mumbles. I have the whole dynamic of that does not work. And even though it's obvious they have a personal relationship, given the give and take that they do now in these little vignettes, it's not working, and he's tired and she doesn't know the right things to ask. And so they're not showing him off in the way that they could, even though they have an 8 million year exclusive relationship with him to produce content. And of course I wrote to Tiger's people and Golf TV and said, let me do it. I said, if you let me do it, you'll get exactly what Tiger has to offer. Nobody else is going to unlock him except for me. And of course, I never heard back from anybody. But yes, there's definitely been a metamorphosis in the way that Tiger has responded to, not responded to, and now grudgingly, I think, yielded to what he feels is a responsibility at this point to try to be more friendly.
Yeah, and I notice it with the young guys waiting for him. It appears, from afar that there's a mentorship that he's, through the team events and probably through phone calls, that he's helped that young group. And, in this heyday, you would have never seen other tour players wait for him. And to see those guys, even like Poulter, who there's a history with from at least Haney's book, waiting to congratulate him, it looks like he's one of the guys in the frat house now. And I think as a golf fan, it's cool to see, the relationship he has with Mickelson and mentoring to those young guys. I just think is fantastic. I never dreamt he would get there. I always thought he'd be the steely-eyed competitor like Hogan was, where he kind of kept to himself. But on a human level, I think fans enjoy seeing that.
Well, yeah, he's definitely gotten better at that. But, the real reality is once he's on the golf course, it's Assassin City. I mean, he wants to take everybody down. He wants to step on your neck, and then he wants to step on it again. That's one of the great things about, watching Tiger down the stretch yesterday. All of a sudden, everything was different. He was in a different mode. He was totally Tiger-esque. Francesco had issues. They all had issues. Koepka knocked in the water. Poulter knocked in the water. Francesco knocked it in the water. I mean, it was a stunning parade, and every great player who's ever played well at the Masters always says the same thing. Oh, number 12? Oh, you just hit a scoring club with a little bit of a draw over the center bunker and just try to put it in that 10-yard strip in the center, and no matter where the pin is, you just take your 2 putts and go on. It's not a hole. You try to make a 2. If you roll 1 in, that's fantastic. But this is a hole you're just trying to put yourself in position, and just like Jordan Spieth a few years ago when he came out of that shot with the wrong club and gave it a little shove towards the hole, that didn't work. And Weiskopf made, an 11 or a 13 there once doing the same kind of nonsense. So, Tiger was